Yo, what's good, people? NøB back again with another RENOISE tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at, it's kind of an old trick, but maybe we're going to put a couple new twists on it for making some easy kind of alien atmospheric textures and sounds and exploring the sonic possibilities of the inbuilt BEATSYNC feature in conjunction with drawing our own waveform. So let's just have a little listen. I'm going to fuck around a little bit, and then you can have a listen and see what kind of stuff we can come up with using this method. Okay, so that gives you a little taste of an idea of what sort of kinds of sounds you can create with this. This patch has a little bit more going on with it, and we'll get into that later. But first I wanted to show you how to set this up just from an init state. Super simple. You're just going to create a waveform in the sampler. I like to give it I always like to work at like 1348. That's like C1 more or less, just for consistency's sake. Although I don't think it really matters. I think you can have your waveform be however long you want, although this gives you some decent resolution for some curves. If you have a very small waveform, you know, in terms of number of samples, it's definitely going to color the result. So the thing we want to do is just turn on our BEATSYNC. And as I said, this is an old trick. Somebody figured this out. Shout out to whoever it was. I'm not sure who it was. I suppose I could scour the internet and try and track it down. But shout out to you, intrepid RENOISE user, who figured this out when these time stretching modes were first introduced. They figured this out real quick and posted to YouTube about it. So it's kind of an old trick, but there's some interesting things we can do with it. So let's just first have a listen to what happens when we're in repitch mode. Okay, not a lot, because you can hear that we're at a very low BPM and we're at a very slow beat sync. So let's bump this up. Now we can hear something's kind of in the audible frequency spectrum. And if we increase our BPM, we get more and more. Let's add some harmonics. Okay, so we can kind of control the pitch with the BPM and octave with our step number here. And this can be useful for creating some nice, like, kind of grainy noise textures. I'm going to create an effects chain and add a little gain, because this does tend to be kind of quiet. So let me pull a gainer up here. Where are you, gainer? And we'll just add like 6 decibels. Depending on how your system's configured, how your RENOISE setup is configured, you may need like a limiter at the end of this, just not to blow your speakers out, but for me, I need to add some gain. That's a little easier to hear. Okay, kind of fun, not too interesting. What gets interesting is when we change our sync mode to one of these time stretch algorithms. And each one has like a slightly different character. The percussion tends to be a little more grainy, a little sharper, a little more, I mean, they both sound pretty digital to my ear, but yeah, a little sharper, whereas the texture mode sounds a little smoother. So I'm going to go with the texture mode. I think that one generally sounds better, although definitely experiment with the percussion mode, because that can get you some unique effects. And now when we change the draw waveform, you can hear how we're kind of like getting that smear. And if we change our beat sync down lower, that gets very pronounced. And as we draw more complex waveforms, we get more higher frequencies. As we draw less complex waveforms or more sinusoidal type waveforms, we get more low frequency content. If you have like square sections, you get more of a, square character. So you can see that the character of the sound is changing pretty rapidly and dramatically. We can change that rate by changing our BEATSYNC value. So we can slow this down. Let's bring our BPM back to something kind of more reasonable. And if we wanted something faster cycle, we can just bring this down. And then if you have something like rolling sampler set up, you can just find those nice chunks of what you're creating. Oops, let's turn that off. Select this, go up here, select an empty sample slot, and then we can just drag this in, and then we've got this audio here. Turn off draw. And one thing I've noticed using this technique is that we often tend to get like some strange low frequency waves. So I always like to correct the DC offset and then normalize. And we can listen to what we got here. Kind of cool. And these are always interesting to pitch up and down in various octaves. Let's cut out this beginning section. I'm not really feeling it. And bump this up 6 dB. And this one might actually sound cool pitched up. Yeah, I kind of like that. Yeah, pretty nice. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I might actually save that. It sort of sounds like some good alien chatter. Okay, so that's kind of the basic idea, but we can go further with this by doing some instrument modulation or adding effects chains to kind of give it more of the character that we want. I like to just go ahead and put a DC offset with autocorrect in our effects chain. So we've got the gainer, we've got the DC offset. Maybe it makes sense to do the DC offset first. And then, you can put in whatever you want. This is really just up to you. As Marco Pierre White says, it's your choice. But yeah, make sure to work the pot, if you know what I mean. So let's go with some reverb. Reverb's always good for atmospheres. We'll open up a splitter and go to our reverb, parallel reverb. This is a patch I designed for 3.5. And it allows us kind of like some frequency control over the entry point of the reverb. And let's turn the low gain down, low cut down. Okay. I'm going to make this a little slower here. And let's turn our draw function back on. And I'm going to go down to a lower octave. So the octave that you're playing this on the keyboard will obviously have a big impact on the character of the sound. And you can hear now we're getting some more of those kind of like alien atmospheric textures. We can bring this even slower. And obviously the height of your waveform is going to correlate to the amplitude, so be mindful of that. If you have like zero crossings or sudden jumps in the waveform, that's going to lend a different character to it. It's going to get more high frequency artifacts and things like this. So let's add an amplitude envelope onto here, just to shape this more like a pad. We'll give ourselves a few seconds. Let's do more like 4 seconds. Change the slope here. Open this up. Let's just keep this up. Let's see how this sounds. Okay, and it might be interesting to add some filter modulation as well. You could get into panning and pitch, but I found experimenting with the different filter types, especially when you have some automated modulation, can really lend a lot of interesting character to the sounds you can create using this method. So let's throw a filter on. We'll just start out with a low-pass filter, and we'll throw an LFO on here. And I'm going to go ahead and assign some of these LFO parameters to macros here. So we'll set frequency to macro 1. I'll just say freak. And amplitude to macro 2. Say amp. And phase to macro 3. Oops. Let's see, I did that wrong. Let's turn this off. Got to click this first and phase here. And we'll call that phase. Okay, so let's see. I want, let's say a maximum amplitude of 0.5. And yeah, there we go. Phase can be full and frequency can be, let's constrain this a little bit. Let's just say 5 hertz and see how that sounds to begin with. Okay, I'm going to turn the resonance down. It's a bit resonant for my taste. Okay, so that gives us some interesting filter amplitude modulation. And so what we're going to do next is create a new effects chain, go into our effects chain presets, and go to the modulation. This is just in RENOISE 3.5, so if you have an earlier version of RENOISE, it's time to upgrade, because we got all kinds of good shit in here. Like this macro control LFO, which I designed, which allows you to exert control over the instrument macros from within the instrument itself. And this is done by LFO control. Each LFO has a key reset trigger. So when you press the key, it can reset the LFO if that's the kind of behavior you want. In this case, that's not what we want. I have some Perlin LFOs that I've saved as presets, and I'm just going to call these up here. We'll do Perlin 1, 2, and 3. Doesn't really matter. They're all kind of smoothed random, and we may have to change the frequency at which they're running, but that's an easy thing to do. But you can see now we have, let's see, why isn't 3? Oh, because we got to turn it on. When we turn this LFO on, then we have macro automation here. And that lends maybe some interesting character to the sound. And let's throw a delay on here too. I like the multi-tap delay unit. And let's put it before the reverb, although it can be interesting after as well. And I've got some presets here. We'll just use our 16 tap. I'm going to change the offset of spread a little bit for more interesting stereo information. Turn the filter frequency down a little bit. Okay, so now we have a different character to the sound altogether. And let's go back to our drawing and see how this sounds. Okay, that's probably good enough for the moment. We'll go to an empty sample slot, grab this section from our rolling sampler, which is a great little program, by the way. This is like 20 bucks, well worth it, especially if you're doing any kind of serious sound design in whatever DAW you may be working in. It's really, really nice for that because you can just kind of grab something from the last however long. I think you can set different settings for the length of recording in the preferences. I think I got it set to a minute or something. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. You figure it out. Turn our draw off. DC looks pretty good, so I'm just going to go ahead and normalize. Even with that DC autocorrect, sometimes the DC shift helps get a little more headroom out of the sample. That's a nice trick, actually, for if you're working with waveforms within RENOISE, if you're doing a lot of resampling. Sometimes you can just hit the DC shift, and it'll change your peaks a little bit. It also changes the character of the sound, so you want to be mindful when you're using this technique. Usually you can get away with a couple DC shifts without changing things too much, but it depends very much on the waveform. But that can allow you to get a little more headroom, or I suppose a little less headroom out of your samples, a little more gain. So let's take a listen to this, see how it sounds at the original octave. And I'm just going to bump this up so our levels are a little more consistent. Yeah, very nice. And let's take it down an octave and have a listen. And this is where I think it gets kind of interesting for atmospheres and textures. Down pitching samples by an octave or sometimes even 2 octaves. You get some really interesting texture and character that way. You know, you lose some low frequency content, but it's shifting things down into the low frequencies. Nice. Yeah, so that's good stuff and all quite usable. So I'm going to go ahead and save this waveform. We'll call this Alien Atmosphere 6. I've been busy. Oops. Save that. And let's go back to our instrument here and check out some of the different filter types and how that can change the character of the sound. So we'll go to a high pass filter. Oops, let's see, we want drawback on. Gives you some nice kind of like industrial ambient textures. Depending on your effects chain, this could be really good for some sci-fi sound design or something like that. Nice and gritty. Let's try bandpass. Maybe bump up the resonance a little bit. Give it a little drive. Slow it down a little here. Yeah, kind of interesting. Let's change this to, I like the comb filter. The comb filter is nice. Got to be mindful of your feedback. You will get some weird DC offset with this. And I tend to prefer kind of the lower end of the note spectrum. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit, bring our input down a little bit. little noisy, but you get the idea. You can do some cool stuff with it. A lot of this kind of depends on how you're finessing the waveform, and of course your effects change settings. I might have something sounds a little high, but I swear it's not me. Oh, the drive. There's drive on there. Take the drive off. Yeah, that's more my style. Cool shit. Okay, I'm going to save that one too. I like that one. Just grab our rolling sampler, chuck it in there, normalize it. Oops, didn't mean to draw. That is one thing you got to be careful you're not drawing over your samples. I'll save that later. And I just want to look at also the, I thought the sine waveform was pretty cool too. Get some nice kind of sci-fi sort of sounds with this. I'll go back to draw. Actually, let's unselect, go back to draw. Fun. I did mess around with the interpolation and playback settings. This is supposed to give a little fade and fade in and fade out at the beginning and end of the waveform. I didn't notice any real big difference, but I guess I didn't try. Let's try doing something like this. It sounds about the same. So I think where this is, you know, computing through the time stretch, this doesn't have much effect. Well, let's see, I did want to save, I think, this chunk here before it disappears, because that was sounding kind of cool. Okay, so anyway, you get the idea. Your effects section can be whatever you want it to be. You can put anything in here. You know, phasers, flangers, distortion, it's up to you. It's just a nice, flexible, quick method for generating some textural soundscapes that have some change and interest. Play with BPM, play with these time stretch, you know, the beat sync value. We didn't get into it too much, but the repitch mode can do some really interesting things too, especially for like noise textures or strange oscillators. But I'll leave that to you to explore. Anyway, hope this has been helpful. Keep making lots of music. We'll catch you next time. Peace.